Ancient Indian temples have long been symbols of the incredible craftsmanship and architectural prowess of ancient builders. Anyone who has encountered descriptions of these structures cannot help but be amazed by their complexity and elegance. Archaeologists and historians have been studying Indian temples for decades, yet each new discovery continues to evoke awe and wonder. In recent years, particular attention has been drawn to the so-called temples on wheels, architectural structures surrounded by legends and mysteries. What was their purpose? Why were they built if they seemingly could not be moved, even with the aid of powerful animals like elephants? These questions remain unanswered to this day. The very name temples on wheels evokes curiosity. Why would ancient builders construct a temple equipped with wheels? These structures are massive stone edifices that, by all appearances, were never meant to be moved. Even if we assume that they could be pulled by elephants, which are themselves symbols of strength and endurance, such massive constructions seem immovable even for these powerful creatures. Moreover, even if they could shift the temple, it remains unclear why and how this would have been necessary. After all, temples are typically static and sacred places, not objects intended for movement. All of this gives rise to numerous hypotheses and speculations, none of which have been definitively proven. Archaeologists and historians have yet to reach a consensus on the nature of these enigmatic structures. Some scholars believe that the so-called wheels on these temples are not actually means of transportation, but rather decorative elements that may symbolize something else entirely. In this interpretation, they might represent shields used in ritual contexts or as protective elements for the temples. However, this theory raises as many questions as it answers. If the wheels were indeed shields, why were they made perfectly round and even capable of rotating? This fact makes the shield theory less likely, as such perfection in form could not have been accidental and was clearly not intended solely for decorative purposes. Proponents of this theory argue that the temples were never actually meant to move, and that their wheels served purely symbolic or ritual functions. However, even in this case, it remains unclear why the wheels were designed in this particular way. In ancient times, nothing was done without deep meaning. So, what could these wheels symbolize? Perhaps they were attributes of some long-forgotten rituals, or were connected to a more complex belief system that modern researchers have yet to understand. Some archaeologists suggest that the wheels, being part of the temples, might symbolize the cycle of life, rebirth, the movement of energy, or the cycles of nature. But this remains just a hypothesis, lacking sufficient evidence. However, the Indian people themselves hold a very different view, one that diverges significantly from the opinions of most modern scholars. In India, it is widely believed that these stone chariots are none other than the technologies of the gods. According to ancient Indian legends, these temples were never intended to be moved by earthly beings such as elephants or mules. On the contrary, they were meant to be transported exclusively by magical beings endowed with supernatural powers. These beings, the Indians believe, served the gods and could accomplish feats that were beyond the capability of any human or animal. In this context, the stone chariots are often compared to Vimana's ancient flying machines described in Indian texts, which were also created by the gods and used by them to traverse the skies. These beliefs are deeply rooted in the Indian people's conviction of the divine origin of such structures. In Indian mythology, gods are often endowed with abilities far surpassing those of humans. The legends tell us that when the gods left the earth, the chariots they left behind remained immovable, but their sacred significance made them objects of worship and reverence. Over time, people began to perceive these chariots as temples built by the gods and endowed them with religious significance. This explains why such temples became places of worship, and their design and appearance have remained virtually unchanged for centuries. Over time, the cult of these temples solidified within Indian culture and religion. People began to see them as gifts from the gods, something sacred that should not be touched or moved. These structures became pilgrimage sites, and many rituals and ceremonies developed around them. One of the most famous of these ceremonies is a festival during which wooden replicas of these temples are created and moved with the help of elephants and mules. This festival symbolizes the reverence for ancient technologies and expresses gratitude to the gods for their gift. It also serves as a reminder of the times when the gods lived among people, and the world was filled with magic and wonder. The festival dedicated to these temples on wheels holds deep religious and cultural significance. At its core lies the idea of honoring divine powers and respecting ancient technologies, which, according to myths, were given to humanity by the gods. On the day of the festival, the wooden temples are adorned with flowers and ornaments, symbolizing fertility and prosperity. They are then moved through the streets of cities, accompanied by the singing of hymns, prayers, and ritual dances. People believe that participating in this ritual brings them the blessings of the gods and protects them from misfortune. Despite its ancient origins, this festival remains relevant and important in modern India, uniting spiritual and cultural traditions. However, the question of whether these structures are merely cultural artifacts or evidence of ancient technologies remains open. For many researchers, the myths and legends surrounding these temples are a valuable source of knowledge about humanity's past. These myths may contain a kernel of truth, hidden behind poetic images and metaphors. Advocates of alternative viewpoints argue that ancient Indian texts and legends should not be dismissed as mere fiction or fantasy. On the contrary, they may reflect real events and technologies that existed in ancient times. In this context, temples on wheels could be connected to a lost science and technology about which we currently know very little. On the other hand, traditional historians tend to view these legends as mythological interpretations and symbols characteristic of ancient cultures. In their view, myths and legends were created to explain incomprehensible phenomena, and in this context, chariot temples can be seen as symbols reflecting the religious and cultural beliefs of ancient Indians. However, proponents of alternative theories argue that such approaches overly simplify the complex and multi-layered texts of antiquity. They believe that myths and legends contain elements of real history, and within them we can find clues to understanding what the world was truly like in the distant past. One of the most striking examples supporting alternative theories is the so-called Rama's Bridge. This structure, mentioned in ancient Indian texts, is located between Sri Lanka and India and is a ruined formation that some researchers believe could have been an actual bridge. Its age is estimated to be between 1.5 and 2 million years, making it one of the oldest artificial structures on Earth. Despite the skepticism of traditional scholars, many alternative researchers believe that Rama's Bridge is not merely a natural formation, but a remnant of an ancient civilization, possibly built using technologies lost to the modern world. This bridge has become the subject of intense research and debate, and its study continues to this day. If we accept the theory that Rama's Bridge was indeed constructed by ancient civilizations, it would open new horizons in understanding the history of humanity and technological development. In the context of this theory, temples on wheels could also be linked to this lost civilization, serving as its monuments or remnants of ancient technologies. Like Rama's Bridge, they could testify to the high level of engineering and architecture in antiquity, which was lost over time. Indian mythology also mentions the so-called tools of the gods, with which they could carve stones, create statues, and intricate ornaments. These tools, according to legends, possessed incredible power and precision, allowing for the creation of masterpieces of art and architecture that still astonish modern specialists. Ancient texts often mention technologies and tools used in the construction of temples or their carving into rock faces. These references make one wonder what technologies might have existed at that time, and how they contributed to the creation of such remarkable structures as temples on wheels. Proponents of alternative theories argue that the existence of such temples is clear evidence of the truth of ancient legends. They believe that these tools did indeed exist and were used to create many of the architectural marvels that have survived to this day. In their view, mythical descriptions may conceal real technologies that were lost or hidden from humanity for some reason. In this context, temples on wheels can be seen as evidence of these technologies, which allowed the construction of complex and massive structures beyond the capabilities of conventional building methods. Another intriguing topic connected with ancient Indian legends is the mention of ape men. In Indian epics such as the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, these beings are described as intelligent creatures with their own culture and civilization. Many researchers speculate that the ape men might be the Yeti mysterious beings whose existence is supported by numerous reports from mountainous regions of Eurasia. In ancient times, these creatures might have had their own state, which, however, disappeared due to some catastrophic events. Indian legends also describe the reason for the decline of this civilization, which might correspond to real historical events. It is believed that these beings, once possessed of significant power and influence, eventually lost their civilization and reverted to a semi-wild way of life. Nevertheless, numerous testimonies of their existence, collected from various parts of the world, indicate that such beings could indeed have existed and even interacted with ancient humans. In the context of these legends, temples on wheels might also be connected to these vanished civilizations, serving as part of their cultural heritage. One of the most intriguing aspects related to ancient civilizations is the evidence of an ancient war found in various parts of Eurasia. Craters, believed to have been caused by bombings, indicate large-scale destruction that could have been caused by the use of technologies far beyond those we know today. These craters have been discovered in places like the Ryazan region of Russia, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, Siberia, Karelia, India, and many other regions. Their age is calculated in tens and hundreds of thousands of years, suggesting they may have been created during a time when humans were still under the dominion of the gods and had not yet attained self-governance. These traces of ancient war raise numerous questions and hypotheses. If we assume that they are indeed linked to ancient bombings, it could indicate the existence of powerful civilizations with advanced military technologies. In this context, temples on wheels could have been part of these ancient cultures, utilizing complex engineering solutions and technologies. Perhaps they served as defensive structures, or had some other strategic significance related to the conflicts of those distant times. All of the above points to the fact that the writings in numerous Indian treatises and legends may contain more truth than is commonly believed in traditional historical science. The temples on wheels found in India may not just be architectural wonders, but also evidence of the existence of ancient technologies and civilizations that possessed knowledge that remains a mystery to modern humanity. While these legends can and should be debated, dismissing them as mere fantasies of ancient writers would be unwise. Chariot temples are just one of many examples that raise questions about our understanding of the ancient world. They encourage us to reconsider our attitude toward myths and legends, and to seek in them grains of truth that could shed light on the lost history of humanity. These enigmatic structures are likely to continue sparking debates and discussions among researchers for a long time, but one thing remains constant. They continue to attract attention and inspire new research, opening up unexplored horizons of antiquity.